Hello, friends. I'm Shane Stevenson, Director of Museum Collections and Curator here at the Buffalo Naval Park. And for today's video, this is going to be the 30,000 foot view of USS Little Rock's Hangar Deck, using some photographs and some blueprints. And then a second part will be similar to other archaeological videos that I've done with Lucas. If you've watched the channel for a while, you've probably watched those archaeological videos stem to stern. And while it's wintertime, Lucas won't be back from across the state. So he and I still work via email and phone. And this was an idea that we had come up with. So for the next video, I'll be walking around looking for some archaeological evidence of the things that I'm talking about in today's video. When I started here, you think when you look at the ship, that's the way it's always been. Of course, I've got smacked in the face many a times, mostly from myself, about how it's not, and I've shared some of those videos with you. And hopefully you've learned a little from these videos. So I will talk about how the hangar deck did not have a second deck. So it went right from the main deck right down to the third deck, but it ain't like that today. So again, I mentioned I have a PowerPoint. Let's get to it. Examining USS Little Rock's curious hangar deck. So here's a great shot, a 3D inboard profile of the USS Cleveland. Again, working with Lucas, we did not find much evidence of a photograph of the hangar deck from one of the Cleveland classes. So thankfully, Lucas did a little more digging, and I'll show that photograph in a minute. Looking at this this drawing, though, this hangar deck space was roughly from frame 126 to 147. Just because of the way it's cut out, you don't really actually see evidence of a second deck either, going from frame 126 forward. But you can see it a little bit right under turret 64 there, where the cutout looks like a wave. You'll see little evidence, and then also right at the very right-hand side under turret 63, you see evidence of the second deck. Frame 126 is the frame right where the turret face is for 64. So if you follow that down, it looks like a little darkened area right next to the turret, and then it meets roughly frame 126, and then second deck stops. If you look aft, you'll see that double bulkhead there, right at the stern of the seaplane hangars, and that is bulkhead frame 147. So we know there's a second deck there, you just don't see it. Now, as I mentioned, Lucas had found a really lovely shot, but it's not of a Cleveland, but it's of USS Honolulu, CL-48, which makes it a Brooklyn class. Now, the Brooklyn classes could be considered the parentage of the Clevelands, and from what I gather and from what I've seen, the hangar deck is nearly, if not completely, identical. So I'll show that shot. And look at how lovely this shot is of USS Honolulu's hangar deck. So the photographer is probably standing at frame 147, maybe 146. You see this obviously wonderful wide open space. You see frame and transverse bulkhead 126 in front of you at the very end. You'll see a ladder on the starboard side with a couple of hatches on what's the third deck. And then at the top of the ladder, you'll see the ending of the second deck. And you'll see another door leading forward. Right next to a lot of mooring lines. On the port and starboard, you'll see quadruple bunks. And on the overhead, you see the elevator cover and hatch, which is the main deck. And also you see the rails on the deck, on the third deck there, to maneuver the seaplanes. Thankfully, the photographer took the shot before the seaplane hangars were actually installed. So we do get a really nice view. And again, this is Honolulu, a Brooklyn class, but I imagine that it almost looks nearly, if not completely, identical. And I'll actually show a comparison of the rails, and you will see at least the rail configuration is the same. What we do see, and I've looked through NavSource, that online photo website, I've looked at all the Clevelands, and I could not find any comparable photo to the USS Honolulu, but you do see that there's some images that are damage images. So on the upper left, you'll see the USS Houston. She was hit by an aerial torpedo off Formosa, which is now Taiwan, in October of 1944 during that battle. And then she was steaming away with the Canberra, and she was hit again by an aerial torpedo. And this becomes the convoy of the Cripples, or Crip Div 1, Cripple Division 1, that Halsey established as they were steaming from Formosa to Ulithi. The Buffalo Naval Park connection is USS The Sullivans was one of the screening destroyers. There were 12 that were screening Houston and Canberra during this trip back from that region to Ulithi. And this blew out, the second torpedo completely blew out the hangar deck. But you can see the port side hull. You can see that solid structure there going all the way down from the main deck down to where the third deck used to be before the steel completely disintegrates. On the right-hand side is the USS Birmingham. She was hit as well, which blew off her hangar cover, her hangar deck cover. And you can kind of see again that white area is transverse bulkhead 147. So while we can't go to the edge and peek around and down, you know, it looks like there is no evidence that there would ever be a deck there. And you can see actually the crane fell down as well. So while I can't seem to find a nice shot like Honolulu's, some of this wartime damage does give evidence that it would have been one large space. So coming to the USS Little Rock today, this is our laundry space on the third deck. Unfortunately, because of equipment, I can't get like the gentleman in the Honolulu photograph is probably at frame 147, 146, 145. The closest I can get, and close as to the center line as I can get, was roughly about frame 145. So I might be a little bit forward of that Honolulu photograph. But you can see it's nice and clean down there. The crew has done a great job refurbishing and refreshing the space, painting it, cleaning it up. And so this is what we see as evidence now on the third deck in the hangar space. Then I went up to the second deck, and this is what we see here. This is now what's called our seaplane hangar, and it is an educational space for encampments and sea cadets. Again, now I'm closer to the center line, and I'm roughly at probably frame 145, 146. But again, now we have the deck back. Obviously, a lot of configurations with the overhead wiring, ventilation systems. And so when you come today, this is what you'd see. But you can imagine, using the Honolulu, what the space looked like from 1945 to 1949. Now, I'd like to take you back. This is a generic Cleveland, either for, seems to be for one of the first 4 Clevelands: Cleveland, Columbia, Montpelier, and Denver. So I used the Honolulu photograph again, and while I'm no artist, I kind of traced the rails for the seaplanes. And you can see it's pretty much an identical configuration. You'll see the one on on starboard actually starts on port and curves around that center stanchion, and then the one on port stays on port, but it's pushed aft a little bit. So you can see those rail lines are in identical configuration, which then is evidence to say why not the rest of the space for the Clevelands is identical to the Brooklands. What we see here is Miami's. All right. If you go to the Maritime Museum in San Francisco online and you type in Booklet of General Plans, they have done a wonderful job digitizing Booklet of General Plans for many different vessels. Lucas and I have used this. This is the USS Miami's. But now looking at this particular space, this leads me to believe this is a post-1947 Miami plan and not the original 1945 plan. The reason for this is because you can see the hangar space has been almost not cut in half, but 25% of it has now converted into a berthing space. And you see the port to starboard bulkhead that's been created, and the angled coming from the center stanchion going forward, leading again to now the remnants of bulkhead 126. So to expand out the berthing, 126 has now been cut in half at the center line. But you'll see that the rest of the hangar space is there, and you can see the outline of the hangar hatch cover. Here is USS Little Rock's 1947 plan. As we know, it's from 1947. And the benefit of this is they've actually shown where the seaplanes would have been stored now. In 1947, now the war's over, you don't need 2 reconnaissance planes. They remove the starboard catapult and seaplanes for the starboard side, and they just leave the port side. I've done a video about that, so you can find that on our channel. And so now you don't need as much space. So what I did was I highlighted in black that same space that we just saw in Miami. And you can see now just the remaining rails in a different configuration. And this would have been how USS Little Rock looked from 1947 to 1949. And then ultimately, even though she was out of service until 1960, when she was converted into what we see today, bringing back the second deck. So using this photograph, again, I tried to show if we were taking a photo of USS Little Rock post-1947 through 1949, this is what we would probably see. I tried to use seafoam green, everybody. That's another story. But you'll see now the bulkhead cutting across from the center stanchion to starboard. You'll see that angled bulkhead. And then you see the two new configured rails in blue there on the port side. So this was my approximation of using the 1947 blueprint here to what that would look like imposed on the USS Honolulu's lovely image of the whole hangar space. So this was the first part, kind of doing the research and using whatever images we're able to find and the blueprints. And now the second part of this, I will actually take the camera down there. With Lucas's help, I'm going to try to find the archaeological evidence for some of these changes. Seaplane hangars on both sides, 45 to 47. 47, they cut out the starboards, and then you have the configuration, maybe from your angle like that, with the berthing. And then in 1960, I showed third deck is now the laundry, second deck was berthing. All right, but now it's our one of our educational spaces. But it was berthing from 1960 to 1976. Well, thank you for all of your support. I hope you like this video. Please leave comments, questions, thoughts, and we'll see you again soon.